Okay, so get ready to dive into a book that seems to just get, well, more relevant as time goes on, I
Yeah.
guess, right?
Yeah.
George Orwell's 1984.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Big Brother, thought police. It's like, it just gets in your head.
Right. Everyone's heard those phrases.
Exactly. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
that always being watched feeling.
Yeah.
But how does it all work? Like, how did Orwell create this world that's so, like, terrifying, but also feels kind of familiar sometimes?
Well, and that's what makes it so brilliant, right? It's easy to get caught up in the dystopian thriller parts of it.
Yeah.
But 1984, it's so much deeper than that. It really makes you think about language, memory, what it even means to be human when someone or something is trying to control you.
Totally. It makes you question, like, what is individuality even? And I think that's what we're really going to dig into today. We're going, like, straight to the source with this one. You know, we're diving deep into excerpts from 1984 to, like, really understand how this dystopia functions. How does a government, I mean, this party, how do they not just control what you do, but what you think? How do they mess with your whole perception of what's real?
And that's the thing about Orwell. He was like a master of showing, not just telling.
Mhm.
All those little details he uses to build this world, those are the keys to understanding how the party stays in control.
So should we just, like, step right into Winston Smith's world then?
Let's...
Because let me tell you, it's a rough one. Just picture it, okay? Dingy apartment, this telescreen blaring propaganda that you can't even turn off. Even something as simple as having a drink, a Victory Gin, I think it's called, sounds awful in this world.
And every single detail matters. The telescreens, the gin, even the architecture of the buildings. It's all meant to control people. Imagine feeling like you're constantly being watched, even in your own home. It creates this atmosphere of fear where you start censoring yourself before you even think something. And that's where doublethink comes in.
Double think, okay, yeah, break that down for me. Because it's one of those Orwellian terms everyone throws around, but what's it actually mean in the context of the book?
Think of it like this. It's mental gymnastics. It's like you can hold two completely opposite beliefs in your head at the same time, no problem. You accept that 2 + 2 = 5, even though you know it's not true, just because the party says so.
Wow.
It's not just about obeying on the outside, it's about believing it on the inside. The party wants you to fully accept their version of reality, even if it goes against your senses.
So in a world like that, where even your thoughts are, like, monitored, how do you even begin to rebel? You'd feel so trapped.
And yet people find a way. That inherent human need for freedom, it always finds a way out. Just look at Winston's diary. That act of writing, that's his rebellion.
It's like he's clinging to that last little bit of himself.
Yeah, you got it. That diary, it's a symbol of his inner resistance. It's a space where his true thoughts and feelings can exist. And that desire for something more, that's ultimately what leads him to Julia.
And their relationship, it's interesting because it's not just like romance in the typical sense. It's a direct act of rebellion against this system that's trying to control every aspect of human existence, even the most private ones.
That's exactly it. Think about it. The party, they want to wipe out any kind of love or desire that isn't directly related to them. They see those emotions as dangerous because they create bonds and loyalties that they can't control.
So when Winston and Julia find each other, those stolen moments they share,
Yeah.
it's like they're reclaiming their humanity, the humanity that the party's been trying so hard to stamp out.
Absolutely. And it raises a question, can you really control human emotions? The party can try, but as we see with Winston and Julia, those feelings, those connections, they run deep. But the party has ways of, well, twisting things, manipulating reality itself, like how history works in 1984, for example. Winston sees this firsthand at his job at the Ministry of Truth.
Where he literally rewrites the past.
Exactly.
It's wild. It reminds me of that movie, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, except it's happening to, like, all of society.
Oh, yeah.
It's not about erasing individual memories, but controlling the whole narrative, you know?
Yeah. And that's the really unsettling part, right? Because if you can control the past, you control the present. Think about it. You can convince people something never even happened or that it happened differently, and suddenly you're in charge of how they see the world around them right now.
It's like the ultimate gaslighting.
Exactly.
You start to doubt your own memories. You start to feel crazy.
You got it.
It's like with Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford, those former party members. Winston, he knows they were innocent, but the party's gone and rewritten history so thoroughly that there's no way to prove it.
And that feeling, that helplessness, that inability to trust your own mind, that's exactly what the party wants. They break down your sense of reality, making you dependent on them for truth. And speaking of which, there's another segment of society in 1984 we need to talk about. The proles.
The proles, yeah, it's like this whole other part of the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just massive part of society that the party sees as like almost less than human, you know,
Right.
easy to manipulate, content with their simple pleasures. Like the party thinks of them as a different species. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. It's how the party justifies its existence, you see. They claim the proles, they just aren't capable of governing themselves, that they need the party to guide them, control them. It's a classic tactic, honestly.
Totally. Like tons of totalitarian regimes throughout history have done that. Say they're protecting the people while they take away all their freedoms.
Exactly.
But there's this one scene, I don't know if you remember it, but Winston is looking out at the proles, and he sees this woman, she's hanging laundry, I think,
Hmm.
and singing. And for a second, he sees hope in that.
Right. What's interesting about that scene is, despite the party trying to keep the proles distracted, they still have those core human emotions, the kind that the party members seem to have lost.
Yeah, it's like they're still able to connect with each other on a human level.
Exactly. They sing, they love, they grieve, all the things the party tries to repress.
It's like this little spark, that the party hasn't been able to put out.
Right.
Makes you wonder, like, if the party ever did slip up, could the proles be the ones to actually overthrow them?
That's the question Orwell leaves us with, yeah. It's that reminder that even in a place that seems completely hopeless, there's still that possibility of resistance, of humanity.
I like that.
But for Winston, things are about to get much, much worse.
Oh, yeah. I mean, things were already bad. But his little rebellion, those moments with Julia, that all comes crashing down.
Right.
And then there's Room 101. Man, just the name, Room 101, it's terrifying, even before you know what's inside.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the ultimate nightmare.
It's like the party reaches into your brain, figures out the worst possible thing they could do to you, the thing you're most afraid of.
And that's what makes it so effective. Orwell never says exactly what's in Room 101 for everyone. He leaves it to our imaginations.
Oh, man, he's really messing with us.
Right. But the point is, whatever is in there, it's your deepest fear, the thing you do absolutely anything to avoid.
It's like your worst nightmare, but real.
Exactly. And they know exactly how much power they have over you just by knowing that one thing.
And we see Winston, he's trying so hard to hold on to like whatever's left of himself.
Uh-huh.
His memories, his love for Julia, those are the things that make him human, that separate him from being like a party drone. But the party, they don't let up.
No, they're relentless.
That scene with O'Brien and the photograph of Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford, those guys, Winston knows they were innocent, but O'Brien's forcing him to deny he's seeing with his own eyes.
That scene is so important because it shows us what the party really wants. It's not enough for them to control what you do. They have to control how you see reality.
It's like they need you to believe that 2 + 2 = 5, even though you know it's not true.
Exactly. They need you to doubt your own mind, your own senses.
There's that line from the book. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. Chills, man. That's some scary stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's the level of control they want. Total and utter submission.
And that's the horrifying thing. We actually see it happen. We see Winston start to break.
Yeah.
He starts to doubt his own memories, everything he thought he knew. He even starts to think maybe the party is right.
It's heartbreaking, This guy who was so set on fighting back, clinging to his individuality, just slowly getting crushed.
And that's where the real horror of 1984 lies. It's not just the dystopian setting, the technology. It's about the potential for human beings to break each other, to force other humans to conform, even at the expense of, their very soul.
Right. It's like, what does it even mean to be human if you don't have your own thoughts, your own memory?
Exactly. But even in all this darkness, all this crushing defeat, there's one thing that lingers for Winston: his love for Julia.
It's like the one good thing he's holding on to.
It's a spark of defiance, a testament to the fact that even in the darkest places, human connection can endure.
But the party, they see that too, don't they? They see it as a threat.
Absolutely. They understand that love, loyalty, any connection that exists outside the party, it's dangerous to their power. That's why they have to target it.
And that brings us back to Room 101, the place where they finally break Winston completely.
It's a brutal, terrifying scene. Orwell doesn't hold back on the terror Winston feels when he's confronted with his worst fear.
Rats. Oh, God, rats.
Right.
Just thinking about it freaks me out. But that's what makes it so brilliant. It's such a primal fear. Everyone hates rats.
Exactly. And the way Orwell describes it, the sounds, the darkness, you can practically feel Winston's terror. And in that moment, facing his absolute worst nightmare, he betrays Julia.
Ugh. I know, I hate that part.
It's awful. He begs them to do it to her instead,
Yeah.
to subject her to the rats, anything to save himself.
It just shows how desperate he is, how strong that survival instinct is when you're facing your deepest fear. But it's also the final breaking point for Winston.
Right. In that moment, he loses everything. His will, his love for Julia, everything that made him, him. The party wins. They completely break him.
It makes you wonder, is there any point in even fighting back in a world like that? If someone like Winston can be so totally crushed, what hope is there for anyone else?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll look at what becomes of Winston after Room 101 and what 1984 ultimately tells us about freedom, power, and the human spirit.
So Winston, he's like gone through the ringer, completely broken down in Room 101. Is there any coming back from that?
It's what gets you about this book, right?
Yeah.
Because on the surface, it looks like Winston just loses completely. The party, they got what they wanted, total control over him. But 1984, it's not just about one guy's fate, right?
Yeah.
It's about these tactics, these awful tactics, and how they can twist a whole society, not just one person.
Right. It's like a blueprint for how to build a totalitarian state.
Exactly.
And, I mean, after Room 101, Winston gets released.
Mm.
But he's not the same Winston,
Yeah.
The guy who was fighting back, who loved Julia, he's just gone.
Yeah, he's been reintegrated, as they call it. And that's one of the scariest parts of this whole thing. It's not enough to just, shut people up or lock them away. They want to change who you are on a fundamental level, to mold you into the perfect party member who actually believes in their messed up ideology, not because they're scared, but because they've been, reprogrammed.
It's like brainwashing, but on a whole other level.
Exactly.
And that scene where he runs into Julia again, it's just, heartbreaking. The connection, that spark they had, it's gone, just like that.
Yeah, their encounter, it's tough to read because it shows how deeply the party has gotten into their heads. They've destroyed the thing that made Winston and Julia human, that ability to love, to connect with another person on their own terms. And what's left is this empty shell of loyalty to Big Brother.
It's like the party colonized their very souls or something. It's creepy. So the book ends with Winston in that cafe, drinking his victory gin, totally buying into the party's version of reality. It's bleak, man. It leaves you feeling gross.
But that's Orwell, right? He wants us to really sit with that feeling that even when faced with this horrible oppression, humans will adapt, even if it means accepting their own oppression.
So it's not just a warning about those in power, it's a warning about ourselves, too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why 1984 is still so important. We might not have telescreens or thought police, at least not in the literal sense, but it makes us think about all the ways power operates, how easily language can be twisted, how fear can make us question what we know is true.
It's like that saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. We can't forget what happened in the book, even though it's fiction, because the ideas are real.
Exactly. 1984, it's a warning, but it's also a call to action. It reminds us that freedom is fragile, something we have to fight for every day.
So what can we do? How do we make sure we don't end up in Winston's shoes?
Think critically about the world around you. Question everything. Don't just accept things at face value, especially from people in power.
And I'd even say, be wary of anyone who doesn't want you to ask questions or who tries to limit what information you have access to.
You got it. Because when we stop thinking for ourselves, that's when we're in real danger.
And that's about it for today's deep dive. Make sure to check out our show notes for links to the source material so you can dive in yourself.
And keep those critical thinking caps on, everyone.
We'll see you next time.